Going to church used to be a regular part of life for Americans when they were growing up. It's a very different story today. Young people are less involved in the church than ever. Here's a look at some of the reasons why.
Overprotective, shallow, repressive. All words some Christian youth have used to describe their faith experience, and undoubtedly reasons why recent studies show that more than half of all Christian teens and 20-somethings are distancing themselves from today's church. The Barna Group, a nonpartisan research company, finds that almost 60% of young people ages 15 to 29 have left active involvement. It's a recent phenomenon examined by researcher David Kinnaman in his new book, You Lost Me: Why Young Christians Are Leaving Church and Rethinking Faith. Kinnaman, president of the Barna Group, explains the reasoning behind the mass exodus and how the Christian community has failed to equip young adults to live in, but not of, the world. His study debunks popular myths about these dropouts and imagines the future of Christianity if the church as a whole ignores the exodus of its youth.
Well, David Kinnaman is here to talk with us about today's young people, and they're leaving the church. His new book, You Lost Me: Why Young Christians Are Leaving the Church and Rethinking Faith. So this is more than just leaving the church. They're also leaving faith as well. And part of the title, You Lost Me, I've heard this from Christians about political parties. I didn't leave that party, the party left me. Right. And is that what young people are saying? I didn't leave the church, the church left me.
Yeah, so often we heard from young people as we interviewed them that they felt as though the church had failed them in some way, that the community of saints had let them down, that they wanted to ask their deep, heartfelt questions and weren't able to do so in a church.
Why is that? I mean, are we just not listening, or are we more focused on other things?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors. I mean, certainly a lot of young people are very distracted. So part of the whole challenge for us is that youth group, church attendance is much less appealing now in a technological world where they can have community such as it is online. And so I think that's part of it, is that the culture is so distracting. It's pulling young people away from the church and from following Christ. But for us as Christians, we're not giving them a reason to follow Christ. We're not listening to their concerns. We're not interested in their, who they're becoming in Christ. And we need to do a better job of doing that.
In your book, you detail some real specific things that are more than just technology, more than just I don't have time, or more than just it's not relevant.
Right.
It's going right to the heart of faith to say, well, wait a minute, you're overprotective, you're in some areas repressive. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, so we interviewed, almost 8,000 people for this project at Barna Group. We do this. We try to understand what's happening in our culture. And, so what was so surprising to me in interviewing all these young people, some of whom had stayed in church, some of whom had left church, some of whom had left their faith, we found that each person had a very different kind of story, very heartfelt, very specific. For some people who were very mathematically inclined or scientifically inclined, they felt the church was anti-science, that they couldn't be a good scientist and be a good Christian. For some people who felt like they were called into music or into some sort of performance career, they felt that the church was overprotective, that it kept them out of culture, out of their calling. For some people, they felt that the church was repressive in terms of sexuality, that the rules of Christianity kept them, from becoming the kinds of people they wanted to be. And again, this is the challenge, is that how do we actually represent the truth of the gospel to this generation and help them become the young, the young, gifted, talented people that they are?
Let's take each one of them. The first one, the science one. As I understand the surveys, a majority of scientists in America are also Christian. So to say science and Christianity are divergent ignores that.
Right.
Is that just something they've been taught, or is it something they're reading in media? How do they get that impression?
Well, I think part of it is that when you talk about the specific kinds of experiences that they have in youth groups, we know that 52% of young Christian teens are interested in some sort of science-related career, medicine, technology, engineering, and yet only 1% of youth pastors have spoken on issues of science in the last year. So part of the reason isn't because we're so antagonistic to science, is that they don't actually hear any of this.
It's not part of the dialogue.
Yeah, right. And so the typical youth group doesn't talk about that issue, I think, enough.
All right. Lyrics. You want to be a popular singer. How do you make it in today's culture and be Christian?
Well, this is an interesting question because many of the people that we talk about in this book are people like Katy Perry, people who have become...
Who's the daughter of a pastor.
That's right, yeah, who grew up in a Christian home. She was a You Lost Me story. She hasn't necessarily lost her faith. She still calls herself a Christian. She still has Jesus tattooed on her wrist. But clearly, Katy Perry, we might wonder how that faith is being expressed. And so, when you talk about how do we really help people be in but not of, Jesus prays this prayer in, John 17. He says he doesn't want to take us out of the world. He wants us to be faithful in the world. And so this is, I think, the heartbeat behind the kinds of approaches we need to have with young people is how do we help them be in the world but not of the world? And so young artists, young scientists, those are the questions that we should be asking.
As Christians, are we creating our own little bubble and saying, oh no, if you go to Hollywood, you'll be corrupted, or oh no, if you go to Wall Street, you'll be corrupted, or oh no, if you become a physicist, you'll be corrupted? Is it fear-based on our part?
I think so. I mean, Katy Perry tells us that she wasn't able to eat deviled eggs. She had to eat angeled eggs when she was growing up. And, that's
just a joke.
It's a funny story. But, I think when you see how sometimes we fail to really engage the world where it is, and when you look at scriptural stories, people like Daniel or Esther, and you recognize that they were placed in a cultural context in Babylon, in exile, that wasn't friendly to faith, and so we need to
really hard on faith.
That's right, and we need to recognize that's very similar to the kind of environment
and there's
now.
This whole lion's den thing you have to watch out for.
Exactly, and that's part of the thing we talk about.
And is that what we're scared of? I mean, it seems to be, and this isn't new to this generation. Right. There have been lots of Christian movements. Let's go separate ourselves, and let's go create either a monastic community or a agrarian. It's all this. You search for utopia where we can truly be Christian and the world will be outside.
Right. Different communities are called to different things, and being separate from the world is a good response for some people. I don't think it's the right response for all of us now as Christians in modern America. And so we need to help this next generation figure out how to be in but not of the world. How can they actually follow Christ in a new way with digital technology, with sexual trends as they are. We need to help them be pure, Christ-following.
What about the sexual trends? Because that's a big one,
right, that
seems to be leading 20-somethings away. That the world is saying, "Oh, this is okay," and go and do this, and the church is saying, "Wait a minute, don't do that." And again, that's not new.
Right.
That's been around a while.
This is an interesting time for us because we see, this is part of the reason why the You Lost Me phenomenon is even more difficult now, is that they're actually getting married so much later, having children so much later. And so in some ways the church has said, it's okay if you get married late, but we want you also to be, sexually pure. And that's a difficult thing for many young people. So I think we need to rethink the age of marriage when we're saying, it's appropriate for people to get married. We need to say you should be getting married younger. You should be making lifelong commitments earlier. And, this is a generation that is facing huge, huge pressures with technology, with media. How will the church help to disciple them in this very different kind of world?
All right. Well, thanks for the book, David. You Lost Me. I would encourage anyone who's involved in Christian ministry, particularly pastors, to get a copy, read it, and find out how you can engage the young Christians in your church. It's available in stores nationwide. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, my pleasure.
All right.